Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners work session for June the 4th, 2012. As a reminder for those of you in the audience, please, if you have a cell phone, put it on vibrate or silence, please, so that it doesn't interrupt the meeting. Commissioners, the first thing that I have is the approval of the work session agenda. So may I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. First item up, our discussion item, as always, with no action to be taken at this time, would be an update on the QSCB projects. Lynn Whitkey from Cabarrus County Schools and Will Crabtree from Kannapolis City Schools. And whoever wants to go first is fine.
I'll go first.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. We have bid all our projects out, and we did lose a few that I stated last time. I think there was 5 that we lost. We'll have to try to seek alternate funding for. But we got our major ones in, and just as a quick review, it'd be the roof at Kannapolis Intermediate School, the HVAC at Kannapolis Intermediate School, the lighting at A.L. Brown High School, the HVAC controls at Jackson Park Elementary, the HVAC controls at Woodrow Wilson Elementary, and a chiller replacement at A.L. Brown High School. We're doing, this week, we're going to excuse me, going to have some pre-construction meetings for the KIS HVAC. We're hoping that all of these projects will get started just as soon as school's out, and we're still looking at a finish by the time school starts in August. The only one that might be iffy on that now is the HVAC and the roof, which may bleed over into September, but we still think we can work around that. But everything's moving along fine, and by the fall we should be complete with our bonds. Having questions?
Great. Any questions? Great. Good. It's always good to have a good update. Lynn?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Much like Will's comments, a lot of our projects are continuing to go forward. As we updated you last month, the one project that we're bidding this month, next week, Monday, as a matter of fact, unless there's some issues, but I think we will still bid on that day. It'll be either the 11th or the 12th, is it's what was called the electrical vault code upgrades. And there are a number of projects, sorry, this one's a bit mixed up. It's actually item 22, where it says electrical panel testing and corrections plus safety equipment. It covers roughly 20 schools, I believe, and that project, in effect, looks at all of the major electrical panels in every one of the buildings, making sure that all the wiring is tight, that isn't in any way deteriorated. If it is, it would be upgraded at that point. But the main thing is to make sure that the units are safe. You may have heard in recent times that there have been a lot of problems with people being injured that have not been properly trained or equipped. And that's the other part of the project. It actually provides our staff with a limited number of protective suits, but most importantly, it gives them the right training to go in and address in effect, a circuit or a electrical panel that is having problems, and they'll be properly equipped and trained so that no one is injured, hopefully in the future. So that project is bidding next week. The remainder of the work is underway. We do have one, I think it's Weinkauf Elementary School is going to be bid I hope in approximately a month. That's the IT portion of that school, and so we'll get that one underway as well. The remaining projects, as Will just said, a lot of it's going to be happening this summer with an awful lot of HVAC work for us, HVAC and controls upgrades. We are currently replacing chillers at 3 schools. And then and some of that work has already been done, as we talked about in the past. Now we're into the controls portion of it, and that's going to start, for the most part, after school is over, so we can start shutting down systems as we need to and making those transitions from old, typically analog, non-digital, to a digital type control system. in all the schools. And so that work, again, is much like Will said, we certainly hope to get all of that done this summer. We certainly have the contractors on notice that they need to perform, and we'll have a lot of extracurricular supervision to make sure that that happens. But other than that, projects are moving along well. They are within budget. We have, as you know, from time to time, moved dollars from one place to another. We're still well within budget on the overall QSCB funding. And as we get through the major portion of the bidding work by next spring, we'll probably be coming back to and looking at whatever funds remain at that point and recommending. We certainly hope we can, in effect, do all the work that was previously set aside, except for the Mount Pleasant chiller and controls, and all the other projects we're hopeful of getting done with the remaining funds. So, and I'm sorry, I talk about the budget and I've got the milestones up, excuse me. The milestones demonstrate that slowly but surely that green group of dark green projects is growing. Those are the completed projects. A lot of the work, as you can see from the top group on the first page, are under construction. There's a few left in design, like I mentioned, Weinkauf, the gymnasium addition, and the weight room work at Concord. Those projects are still in design, but everything else is under contract. So we're looking good, and entertain any questions.
Okay, any questions, Commissioners?
Yeah, I would like to ask about at Concord High School, the vocational building remodel. Could you explain that one? I believe it's been canceled, but.
That was one of those 4 or 5 that were set down,
Okay.
Sort of put on hold. Cancel is probably too strong a word. I guess I'll just say on hold at this
Okay.
point. Canceled from the active group for sure, but it is, as I mentioned, our hope that we can go back in and pick up a number of those projects towards the end of the QSCB funding.
Okay. And was some of that money moved to the CHS auditorium?
It was, yes.
Okay.
And, I mean, in retrospect, I was talking to Dr. Shepard about that this morning. People are probably going to look back and say, well, why in the world did you make that move, or why did you transfer those funds? At the time, we were moving monies from projects we knew existed, and we knew, for example, we were short on the auditorium. We had funding available in vocational school. We knew we were going to have monies drop out, as we've explained, that we didn't use in other projects, and we could go back. But we didn't have a crystal ball. We only knew that money, that a project had been bid and was over, and we had a place within the same school that we could transfer funds. So that was the decision we made at that point. If we were at this juncture in time when we were making that decision, we would probably have made a different movement of funds. But, that's crystal ball gazing at the point where we were at. So we did the best we could, and now we'll go back and refund some of those other projects.
Did y'all have a bid on that chiller and cooling tower at Mount Pleasant?
No, sir.
It hadn't been bid yet.
No, sir.
Any other questions? When I looked at this, you have a school board meeting today.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. And looking over that agenda, you have a couple items in there for moving funds. Do we need to have on our agenda a placeholder? Are you going to bring something to us? Do you anticipate that we need to make sure we have an action item?
It's movement of funds, at least in the case of the dining room furniture, movement of funds for that. We typically, we do that, let me explain. The process is that if we move the funds within the school, from project to project, that does not require DPI approval. And so we've just basically been doing that internally with our board approval. And we certainly notify the county staff that we're doing that, but we've simply been doing that internally because the money is all within the school. If we go, and let's say we moved money from Mount Pleasant here, then we would have to have DPI approval, and that requires a specific process that requires requires submittal of that to DPI.
So, and I just glanced at the agenda, the school board agenda for today, so
Yes,
I
ma'am.
wasn't 100% certain. I just wanted to make sure we don't need to have a placeholder in here. You're not anticipating anything that we need to move on
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we weren't overlooking something.
Right, no, I appreciate that.
That's all. I just want to, make sure that I didn't forget something, and then
No,
after tonight or next week, you come back and say, oh, we should have put something in the agenda. So I just double checking.
That particular item will be on our July agenda.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we weren't, I don't want to hold you up if it's something, as simple as putting a placeholder. That's why.
Yeah, I
just
haven't-
want to double check. We don't want to delay projects. You're going into summer, and this is when you need to be moving on and getting things done. so.
It is one. I mean, and I hadn't had a chance to talk with staff, but that project, it does involve purchase of furniture, and it's got a long lead time. So, if possible, I would like to move it to, I knew we had missed this agenda. I didn't know if we could put it on your business agenda, because that is an important project as far as timing goes.
And the other one was at Central Cabarrus. Wasn't there a project at Central?
Yes, ma'am.
Also, so, I mean, that's up to you. I think if we need to put in a placeholder, I don't have a problem adding it,
Okay.
as long as we could get the information this week.
Surely.
After your board meets tonight. I mean, I know it's an issue of timing between when the
Right.
two boards meet, so.
Right, exactly.
I don't know if you need it on the June meeting. I'm just asking to make sure.
Yeah, I certainly, we do need it on the furniture one, and
Okay.
I'll check with Pam on the other.
Okay, well, we will add a placeholder at 4.7 on this agenda. We'll just have a placeholder for Cabarrus County QSCB, and
Okay.
you'd get that in, and as long as they look over it and everything's fine, we can leave it on there. If not, we can remove it. Would that
Appreciate it.
be okay? One was at Central Cabarrus, I remembered, but I couldn't remember exactly what it was.
It's a change order to, we have to upgrade a server room based on a recent code inspection, and we have to create a fire separation and do some other work in that space. And there's some other things attendant to that work, but that's the main focus of that particular request at Central.
And then the other one, is it Concord, is that what you
Concord,
said?
yes, it's
Okay.
the dining room furniture request to purchase.
Those the only two that you have them?
Yes,
I only remember glancing and seeing two. I couldn't remember what the projects were.
that's, I'm trying to
Apparently,
think.
it's two projects,
After
one
my
at Central
agenda.
and one at Concord. And, once we get to adopting the agenda, if everybody agrees, then we can put a placeholder in there, and we'll wait on the information. Of course, if we don't get the information this week, then we wouldn't be able, we would take it off, so. Any other questions concerning the QSCBs? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate
you.
you both
Thank
coming.
you.
Okay, the next item we have are action agenda items, and actually, this first one, we need to go ahead and adopt tonight, to suspend our rules and adopt tonight. So I will call up Lori from the Regional Ombudsman from Central Iowa Council of Governments to talk to us about a proclamation for World Elder Abuse Day, and also present your annual report.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here today. Thank you all for allowing me to be here. I do have a brief presentation, which is the 2011 annual report of the newly formed Elder Abuse Task Force. And I always abbreviate it and call it the Elder Abuse Task Force, and I need to call it the right thing, and that is the Task Force for the Prevention of Abuse and elderly and disabled persons. This is a multidisciplinary and multi-agency effort that has recently developed in Cabarrus County. And the goal for this group is to help the community recognize the problem of elder abuse and be in a better position to be able to address it and combat it. It is a problem that's growing, and as you probably know, the Cabarrus County has a child abuse task force already, and this is modeled similarly to that, where it's a multidisciplinary team working together to address this problem. The annual report that you have, which is provided simply for your information, reviews the problem of abuse, which of course is on the rise, details the mission, values, and vision of this task force, and lists the members and agencies. And while I'm on that, let me not forget, we do have a couple of members who are with me today, and I'll go ahead and just mention their names. We have Kathy Maurer from DSS and Alta McKelvin from DSS, and Dawn Lillard, who works with Piedmont Behavioral Health. And on the third page of the report, you'll see the list of all of the members of the task force and see the varied disciplines that are represented at this group, which is a terrific group, and that's why it helps Cabarrus County be able to be in such a better position to combat abuse. Abuse is such a huge problem, and it's so varied that one agency isn't positioned to combat abuse. It has to be multidisciplinary, and so that's the beauty of this group. The task force started in late 2010, and through 2011, we covered the logistics as we got settled, policies and things like that. Got our P's and Q's down in 2011, and then we began reviewing cases and making presentations to the community in 2011, and we'll continue to do that and have plenty of educational efforts set for the coming year. And lastly, I wanted to touch on the fact that June 15th is always World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and that is something that is fairly new. It's only been celebrated for, I think, 7 years now as an international effort. And as such, we are requesting that the commissioners consider adopting a proclamation to recognize World Elder Abuse Awareness Day for 2012. And I believe Kay passed around, there are some purple ribbons. The idea behind the purple ribbons, either to wear purple or to wear the purple ribbon on June the 15th in recognition of your support of World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And that is it, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, Commissioners, do you have any questions? Okay, we would need to suspend the rules. So at this time, I would accept a motion to suspend the rules in order to approve the proclamation.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor of suspending the rules, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And let me read the proclamation. Whereas Cabarrus County seniors deserve to live safely with dignity and as independently as possible with the supports they need, and whereas elder abuse is most often defined as any act that harms a senior or jeopardizes his or her health or welfare, and whereas eliminating abuse to older persons is each community's responsibility, and whereas Cabarrus County is concerned about the risk to our older residents who suffer from neglect or are victims of financial, emotional, or physical abuse, and whereas all of our residents should watch for signs of abuse such as physical trauma, withdrawal, depression, anxiety, fear of family members, friends, or caregivers, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners for Cabarrus County, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim June the 15th, 2012 as Elder Abuse Awareness Day in Cabarrus County and encourage everyone to commit to build safer communities for our elderly residents. So at this time, I would accept a motion to adopt the proclamation as presented.
So, go ahead.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. And we encourage everyone to either wear a purple ribbon or purple on June the 15th. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, the next item we have Ben Rose from Human Services here to talk about HCCBG funding plan and reorganization for fiscal year 13. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to seek approval from you to consider an updated Home and Care Community Block Grant funding plan. The Home and Care Community Block Grant, it's a federal funding source that we get for the county that provides some core services to our aging population, 60 and over. There are about 18 allowable services that are provided under this grant, and of course there is a slight local match of about 11%, I believe is about the local match that we have in it. Some of the services that it can help cover are some you're very familiar with, like adult daycare, congregate meals, the Lunch Plus clubs, in-home services, transportation, Meals on Wheels. Those are some of the services that we cover with Home and Care Community Block Grant. Each year, a funding plan on how these monies will be spent is developed by Home and Care Community Block Grant Advisory Committee, and they work under the lead agency for the HCCBG. And basically, their task, their role is to sit down and look at the amount of funding available determine where the needs are and how best to distribute the money. Again, this is a block grant, so it's a set amount of money, and they distribute it amongst the services to try to best meet those needs. With the transition this year of aging and kind of moving aging services to human services and then some of the programming into the Parks Department, the committee needed to meet to address a couple of issues. They needed to, of course, look at the funding plan, make sure that the funding was where they wanted it to be, because they had already met earlier in the year. And they needed to make changes in who the agency, what agency would receive the funds. As you know, the Department of Aging in the past historically had received a lot of these funds, and of course now the Department of Aging would not exist as an entity by itself. There would be Human Services and the Parks Department, so they had to assess those two things. So that's what we're bringing forth to you today. There's about $759,000 available in federal money for these services that we provide, and of course, again, that's not including the local match. Local match is about $84,000 that goes into these services. There was only one funding level change that was recommended by the committee, and basically that was a change in the senior center operations line item. We decided to there's a section that's allowed under the HCCBG funding plan called information and assistance. Or basically, that's when we meet with clients, do an assessment of their needs, and then try to get them to a resource. We decided to lower those funds by about $58,000 because with the consolidation of social services and aging services, we feel like we can meet that need with that new core group of staff. And we could reduce those funds and allow those funds to focus on the CRC, which you've heard a lot about, I think, over the past couple of years, because that's where our eventual goal is to be able to have one door for all clients to access services with. So by reducing those funds, we were able to increase the senior center operations by about $58,000. We felt like that's where the need was to help them with the programming and services that are at the senior center. That will give them a total of about $95,000, I believe, for funding there. And again, too, it's just basically decreasing one item and increasing it by the other. And that's basically the one change that they made in terms of the funding level. So it was just one, but I think it's a good change. Of course, the other change is we have DSS historically has received funds, the Department of Aging has received funds, and Transportation has received funds. Well, basically now, DSS and Transportation will be Human Services as of July 1st. So they had to make that designation change there. And of course, the Senior Center Operations Department of Aging will no longer exist, so that will go to the Parks. So that was another change that was made there as well. The other agencies remain the same, like Cabarrus County Meals on Wheels, and the other programs other services that get money. So those were the two changes that they recommended, and with that, we would, submit that to you for your approval, since it is you're the final authority in how these funds are expended. The committee is appointed by you and does work for you and on your behalf, and they make recommendations, again, based on their meeting and their deliberations regarding what services are needed. So that was basically the changes that we will submit for your consideration.
Just a note. The money it's the same money coming in as always come in, other than and it's going to the same programs and the same services. It's just the titles of the departments have changed. So none of those services or none of those programs are going away. It's still receiving the funding just as they've always received.
We felt that by increasing the senior center operations, it will allow them to have more flexibility and continuing to have information and intake and assistance there as well, too, at the center, because they will be providing that service there just like they always have. So we'll give them some additional funding to help support that. And again, with the use of DSS staff, consolidating with the aging staff, we'll be able to cover that on our end from the human services side.
So it sounds like by shifting the funds, there's actually more funds that are going to the senior center.
That's correct.
So they're benefiting in the positive by DSS covering some functions, which is then allowing more money to support the senior citizens.
That is correct. That is correct.
That should be good for them. If you get more money, you can do more things. That seems like that's positive. Commissioners, do you have any questions at this time?
Is this what's going to put the senior center under the Parks Department?
No, sir. This is it's all part of the process. When the HCCBG funding plan was was originally drafted, it was not sure that that the transition was going to take place. So it identified the Department of Aging as getting the money. What this is going to do, this is part of the process of making those transitions, so part of the staff going to Human Services and part of it going to the Parks Department. But it's just a report that shows where those monies are going, and then it's so that there's documentation from the federal to the state to the local level.
In other words, this is just to get the grant.
Set.
To a certain degree, you have to identify, there's only a certain amount of agencies that can receive the grants, so whether it has to be governmental or nonprofit, and basically, we just need to properly identify those agencies. And since transportation won't exist as a sole department, it will be under Human Services. We would identify that as Human Services. DSS will be Human Services as well, too.
What happened to the people that have been running those departments?
They're still, they would be division heads instead of department heads. They would still be, the transportation director would still be called the transportation director, but transportation would become a division of Human Services. The aging director would actually become the new title. We're not totally satisfied with the new title, but park superintendent, he would also be he would be supervising all the park managers and the senior services and the senior center manager. So therefore, he would be, as far as an org chart, he would be second in charge of the Parks and Recreation Department.
But if you're putting them all under one organization, don't look to me like you'd need all those people.
We have consolidated a few. In fact, within the Department of Aging, there was one vacant position that we did not fill, and there was some part-time positions that we either.
There were some in-home aid positions that were eliminated also.
Right.
How many positions?
There was one full-time and.
One full-time and 3 part-time.
And within the Department of Social Services, we eliminated 2 positions through the consolidation process.
And transportation also eliminated a position.
Right.
Were they
Full-time.
already vacant?
The one position was vacant. One position I had was filled with a core staff or a temporary person, so that it didn't result in a person losing a permanent job within the DSS realm.
So in reality, we're not eliminating anything, we're just shuffling people around.
No, that's not correct. There was positions, there was one position in aging where somebody retired, so we did not rehire. So that position was a savings. There was a position in the Department of Transportation with the consolidation, there was already somebody within DSS performing that same function within DSS, so therefore it was a mid-level supervisor position that we did not need, so there was a position eliminated, and there was a person in that position. So that was a savings, and then as with any other, when we do that, we would allow them to apply for any other openings. We would try to transition them into another position that's open within the county. If not, then they would have opportunities to apply in the future. So that's 2 full-time positions that are going away, and then there's several part-time positions.
But we're putting them somewhere else if there's a vacancy.
If there is a vacancy of a position that is still needed, yes, sir.
Yeah, so within social services, we actually eliminated 2 positions. While we moved one person to a vacant position, the position she moved from was eliminated, which was a supervisory position. And then we eliminated the person that was in a temp position, which was working full-time. So that position was eliminated.
But one of those positions was already vacant.
That's correct. A person was moved to a vacant position that we're not eliminating, but her position was eliminated.
That vacant position was also due to a retirement in April.
Correct.
Is that answering your question, Mr. Burge?
I mean, I don't see no savings in what you're doing, but, no, it didn't answer my question.
There are, as the county manager indicated, he is correct. There are 2 full-time positions and 3 part-time positions that will be eliminated. And the savings comes, even though you're moving people around, the savings comes in the number of positions that you're budgeting or have to pay out during the expense during the year. So even though we're moving people into vacant positions, for example, we had 2 positions originally. If you move someone into a vacant position, then you can eliminate the other. That reduces or cuts your expenditure in half. So there is a savings with that regard.
How does it cut your expense in half?
If you originally had 2 positions,
Yeah, but I'm saying if you got a vacant position and you move somebody from this position to the vacant one and leave this one empty, how does that cut it in half?
because if you have both positions and you fill both positions, then you have that expenditure twice.
Yeah,
You're
I
not,
mean,
you're not
If they
leaving
weren't
it,
filled, you didn't need them, did you?
you're not leaving it empty. You're doing away with it. So you're no longer funding that position. So the funding for that position goes away with,
I mean, it was already gone.
no, it was not
If it
gone.
was vacant-
It was just vacant. It's still
Well,
being
I mean, you wasn't
funded.
paying somebody for a vacant position, were you?
We would have hired somebody to fill that position.
Well, I mean, if you didn't need them, why would you have hired them?
That's the point. We did need somebody for that position. That's why we kept that position. We were able to move somebody from another position that we no longer needed, and we were able to move them into a position that we did need and do away with the position we did not need.
Even if the position is vacant, if we've budgeted for it, there are tax dollars that are funding that are funding the position.
Basically, how, within the DSS, how we approached it was, we had programs that were supervised by 2 people. When we had a retirement and then we promoted one of the supervisors into that position, we took both programs they were supervising and combined them. So the one supervisor is now supervising the programs that were supervised by 2, and we restructured the programs to make it easier to supervise. And with the combining of the aging resources, it gives them more resources to work with. So that's where the consolidation, where we're kind of joining forces of people, has helped us, because we can meet more needs now that we've joined some forces with folks coming from aging.
Yeah, I mean, one way to look at it is if you have 2 positions, and I'm just picking a number out of the air, they're both 50,000. So just happens that this person retired, but that's the position that's the most critical. You take this person and move them into that position, you still eliminate this one from the budget. So you've now reduced your budget by 50,000, because they did eliminate 2 full-time positions plus 2 part-time positions. So there has been an elimination of positions. It's much preferable if you have somebody with the right skill set, and that's the position going away, to move them into a position so that we don't lose a job. But that was the choice, was to move somebody into position, consolidate, but they still did eliminate positions in the budget. So this next budget will show a reduction because there's been elimination of some positions. And that's just how you have to budget. You have to budget for the full year. Even if it's not filled, you have to budget for it. So next year's budget will show a reduction in those areas. Other questions?
One of the synergies that we were trying to create when we talked about this some years ago is the idea of, instead of having silos, to have more of a unified effort in Transportation, Department of Aging, and Department of Social Services. It seems like this is the first step that has been taken towards unifying those 3 efforts to try and have it a consolidated effort. Do you anticipate more savings in the 2014 or 2013 budget? Actually, the 2014 budget, when we get this, when you start getting it fully implemented and seeing what things can be done?
I think it would be possible. We're still, developing the efficiencies that come from the consolidation. We're still finding ways to take required services that we do and share them equally across the board. But I think it's very possible that more savings will come forward. And I really, truly think you're going to see much better service. It's when we're physically under one roof, I think we'll be able to really, we've talked about possibly consolidating the call centers between transportation and DSS, making those one call center, so that might be where you could find some more savings.
From what I remember is, when you're talking about call centers, information could not be shared when they were silo departments.
Correct.
And one of the things is, once they're a congregated department, then you're able to share the information and save on that. Well, that'll be one savings, but you got to get it together first
That's
before
correct.
you can realize the
Physically
savings.
get them together. That's correct.
Now, also, in regards to the Department of Aging, the programs and services being offered, let me back up. The programs being offered, health programs, things of that nature at the senior center, how many of those programs will be eliminated as a result of this merging?
Zero.
No
They-
programs will be
No programs
eliminated?
at the senior center, nor the physical fitness programs that are associated with the nutritional sites. They will all carry on just as they have, just as they currently are.
What anticipations, if any, are there to increase potential programs?
But I think now with this going on, the same efficiencies that Ben's realizing in human services may also, we're hoping will also take place in the Parks Department, or Parks and Recreation Department, because their staffs will also be working together. They have in the past some on different events anyway, with senior center, or the senior games and the health and wellness day and that type of thing. So they've already worked together anyway. So now this will bring their staffs together. Again, as in Mr. Murphy, he'll be overseeing parks as well as senior center. The senior center staff and the park staff will be able to collaborate a little bit more on different programs and maybe even enhance those programs with the additional staff.
Okay. Will there be a way, and I don't know the answer to this, so will there be a way for the parks, for the senior or the Department of Aging board to meet with or get a presentation from parks to understand the additional programs that could be available once this merger is completed?
Yes, sir. And by all means, that should be number one priority. Once the budget's approved, we will get everybody together again and start describing what programs both aging and parks already do, and see how and assure everybody involved that it will not change. The only change would be to enhance them because of the consolidation, but also it provides an additional opportunity to have even more programs or more events where maybe there is some cross-generational events where the youth and the elderly citizens are actually participating in the same event. It's not going to be forced, but it would surely be out there in the possibilities. And then therefore, and also the programs that are taking place in the senior center only could be expanded to go into the parks. We've got a lot of beautiful parks out there that we could expand some of those programs into as well.
Okay. Let's talk about services. How about services? Do you see those decreasing at all for the seniors?
Not at all. The four individuals that are moving to the Human Services umbrella will still be providing the same exact services they provide now. In fact, we will be able to help them more because they, in addition to providing the core services that they're assigned to, they have in the past been doing intake and dealing with programs and staying at the senior center until 7, 8 o'clock at night, sometimes helping with programs and events there. They'll be able to truly focus now on the core services that they do, like caregiver support, in-home services, and adult daycare, those kind of things. I think we are truly seeing right now, as we've gone through some more recent planning, that the bringing together of our staff, not only are we able to bring together staff, reduce positions in the process, but we are not anticipating any cuts in services. In fact, I think it will enhance the services and it will enhance the existing staff. When the staff came and met with us and realized that in DSS we do intake, we do assessment and referral already, we can perhaps combine those resources and get that service done by one core group. It brought a sense of relief to them almost, because they now can realize they can focus on their specific programs that they deal with. And the CRC, again, is a priority one, I think, that the aging community has developed for our, it's a number one goal. And it's really has stalled over the last couple of years. So now, through these consolidation of resources, I believe we'll be able to strengthen and get that moving forward so that we can really help our seniors in the future.
Explain a little bit what is CRC?
The CRC is basically it's the concept where there's no wrong door of entry for a senior to get help.
What is CRC? What is that?
Community Resources Connection, I believe. Is that right? I got it right. These acronyms. Community Resources Connection. It's a statewide project, and I think it's up and running in a few counties now, but basically the concept is that wherever a senior goes, they can get an assessment done, and it will hopefully, the big concept is it will be done via the web, it will be done via the internet. That data will be submitted to a program where providers throughout the community are available, and they will get that data and they can say, I can help that person, we have that service, and they can make contact and go ahead and set the service up. So it's a portal of entry to get all the community-based services for aging that's available to them. And we really want to get that moving forward.
Now, one of the dynamics that was beneficial, I believe, and I don't know this, but it seems to me, is that when aging had programs and services under one roof, as a senior transitioned more from programs into needing services, there was that synergy. What plans have been put into place or have been discussed or developed so that that synergy isn't lacking, so that even though you have programs in one location, you got services in another location, how are you going to have the segue? How are you going to get transitioned from one place to another?
The CRC will be one aspect of that, if we can get it up and going, without a doubt. Another aspect that we plan to do is that we will not be working in silos as Park and Human Services. There will be no lines between these two operations. And we have already talked about joint task force, joint task committees to deal with certain issues. There will be a presence of the services staff in Human Services. They will still have a presence at the senior center. They will be outposted there. In fact, our goal is not only to have presence there with their services, but to have DSS presence there as well, Medicaid applications, adult services, guardianship, those kind of aspects as well too. Have that presence as well at the senior center, and then vice versa. And our goal too, hopefully here, is that we can expose more people to what's available to them. We have a lot of people that come up into DSS that are 60 and over that have no idea a senior center exists. They have no idea of certain services that are available through the department, what was the Department of Aging, because they do have unique services. They might not qualify for something in DSS, but they can qualify for that. So we'll have that more of, and we've always had that flow, but it'll be even better now. I think it'll be enhanced so that we make sure we don't miss anybody along the way.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I hope that you can convince the senior citizens that it's better for them.
That's our goal. I think, and we've told everyone that we've met with on the occasions that we've had the opportunity to be before them, that the services and programs, nothing is proposed to go away.
But I've had a lot of calls from people that don't like it. I might be a senior citizen one day.
Okay, are there any other questions concerning the HCCBG funding plan and reorganization for fiscal year 13? Okay. Ben is here for the next item, 4.3, approval of designation of Central Carolina Council of Governments Area Agency on Aging as the HCCBG lead agency.
And this follows a little bit on the funding plan that we just talked about. This is going back again to the HCCBG process and what we are required to do to get these funds for the county. And each year, you as a board have designated a lead agency that will basically oversees the process. The lead agency is responsible for directing the advisory committee that submitted you the funding plan. They kind of direct those actions. They make sure they conduct any public hearings that are required, and they monitor and ensure compliance as a lead agency. There's, again, a very limited number of agencies that can be designated lead agency, and historically, the Department of Aging has been that lead agency. Since we are transitioning with the Human Services umbrella, it's no longer appropriate for the next fiscal year for the Department of Aging to be the lead agency. We've met with Central Carolina with Gala and talked about what would be the best step to take as we are transitioning, and we physically won't be together for a few more months yet to go. And through those discussions, it's my recommendation, and Gala agrees, that we would like to see Central Carolina appointed as the lead agency for next fiscal year. That will allow us to continue to develop our processes, develop the plan, take another look at the HCCBG Advisory Committee because you appoint them. So how will this transition to Human Services and then having some services under Parks, how will that affect that committee? So that will give us some time to deal with those issues. The goal is that we would look to do this just for next year, and then the following year, our hope is that Human Services could be designated the lead agency. But during transition and just for ease of anything else, administrative ease, we would like to recommend that the Central Atlanta agency be the lead agency for 2013, which would be something you would need to designate.
Okay, questions on this item?
And there is no charge for that service, so we still receive the same amount of money, and there's no administrative fee that they would charge.
Yeah, and they agree. They don't want this to be a permanent situation
No.
either. They're offering to do it for this year coming up as we go through the transition.
That's correct.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's move on to 4.4. Kevin Grant here is to talk about solid waste and resolution to adopt the 3-year update to the solid waste management plan. Good to see you.
Just want to give a brief introduction to our solid waste management plan for 2012. State regulations require that we develop a 10-year solid waste management plan and that this plan gets updated every 3 years. Currently, Kannapolis, Harrisburg, Mount Pleasant, and Midland participated in the development of this plan. The city of Concord develops their own solid waste management plan. The 4 municipal governments that have participated in this plan have also recently adopted resolutions in support of this plan. The public was also invited to help develop and participate in this plan. Unfortunately, when we had a public meeting on May 15th, we did not have any participants. This plan is meant to serve as a tool or a guide for future waste reduction planning decisions and reference. That's our goal. That's when we met with the 4 municipalities. We want to make sure that this is a living document that we get together every 6 months, kind of review our numbers, see what's going well, what's going bad, and how we can improve on the waste generation rate in the county. This plan also establishes a waste generation goal of 0.56 tons per person per year by the year 2022. Our current rate is 1.27 tons per person per year, which is actually down from 2008 numbers of 1.87 tons per person per year. And just as a note, the current state average is 0.99 tons per person. One thing we've seen a reduction is the fact that Kannapolis and Concord has recently gone to expanded recycling. That's getting that number down there, and hopefully unincorporated Cabarrus County by January 1 of 2013 will have expanded recycling as well. So we'll hope to drive that down. And I know the document's about 100 pages, but you could actually reduce it to a simple phrase by having everybody remember what the 3 R's are. First R is reduce. Second R is reuse, and then the third is recycle. If we could reduce the stuff we purchase and use, and then if the stuff that we do have, reuse it, and then ultimately, and the last thing is to recycle, I think we can get these numbers down. So with that, we're asking the board to adopt the resolution accepting and endorsing the solid waste management plan of 2012. Are there any questions?
Commissioners, any questions?
You mentioned some of the statistics. How much has it reduced since the previous plan?
We're down about 30%. We've gone from 1.87 tons in 2008, that's per person per year, and we're down to 1.27.
Wow.
So we're trying, if we can keep that pace, we'll definitely achieve that goal in 10 years, which is what the state's asking us to do.
And so what do you attribute to that?
The big thing, honestly, is the expanded curbside recycling. We're seeing, 25% increase in recycling in Concord. It's similar in Kannapolis. Like I said, once we go to expanded curbside through unincorporated section, and then I believe Midland as well is going expanded. It just makes it easier for people to recycle, and it just seems like that more people are responsive to that these days. Then the next thing to do is to get out there with the businesses too and get them to kind of reduce, because some of those numbers are included in this as well.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have transportation, and not seeing Randy. I think Bob's here. about the ROPE Rural Operating Assistance Program funding and public hearing request.
Good afternoon. We are here to request a public hearing for our annual ROPE grant. This year, the state of North Carolina is funding 3 programs, the Elderly and Handicap or EdTap program at $101,175, the Employment Program at $24,609, and the RGP or Rural General Public Program, $84,997 for a total grant of $210,781, which is an increase of $14,174 from last year. This grant, the employment and EdTap portion are funded 100% with no match required. The RGP program does require a match, but the state allows us to make that match up in fares. So basically, it's all funded 100%.
Questions about ROPE funding?
How many people y'all carry to work back every day?
Daily, I don't have that number for the year. We have, through May, have carried 9,309 trips.
For the year, 9,300?
Yes,
Is that round trip or is that one way?
that's one way.
You do carry them back, don't you? Or do you?
If they want to, yeah.
I mean, do they or?
Most of the time, yes.
Most of the time.
Sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they like
Sometimes they'll get a
No, or
ride.
they just stay all week and you take them back, take them back.
Yeah. Bob, that's calendar year or fiscal year?
That's July to
July
May.
to
May.
May?
What do they pay for the service? Anything?
The employment does not pay a fare, no, just RGP.
They don't pay a fare at all.
No.
No, the person pays a fare.
Yeah, the person you haul, they don't pay anything.
For the employment and EdTap, the client does not pay any
Okay.
fare. The RGP, they do pay a fare.
Now, is that door-to-door service?
Yes.
That's the employment.
Yes, all of it. Yeah,
Yeah, that would be all those programs. Bob, explain what is RGP?
Rural General Public, that is for anybody that lives within Cabarrus County that is being picked up in the county and being dropped off in the county that does not qualify for any other funding source like DSS or agent.
And they do pay a fee.
They do pay a fee.
Okay. How much is their fee?
It's $3 each way.
And that's anywhere in the county? It doesn't matter how far you're going, the distance, $3?
Right.
Okay. And is that the vans that you see, or is the vans that?
That's
we see?
the
Okay.
county vans,
Yeah,
yes. It's not the
okay.
links.
Right, that's a whole separate program.
Right.
Yeah.
You only haul them in the county?
Has to be within the borders of the county. They have to be a resident of the county, picked up in the county and dropped off in the county.
And work in the county?
Well, like, I guess they could get dropped off at the bus
Or they get
station.
dropped off the Mecklenburg County line and go on to Charlotte and work?
They could, yes.
Yeah, there's several programs. The RGP program is not necessarily linked to employment. They're the ones that pays a fee. All they have to do is live in the county and be taken from a point A to a point B in the county. Are there any income qualifications for that program, or are there?
That's just a county residence.
that-
We have a lot of, for example, we have some agent clients that need to go grocery shopping, that the funding source through agent won't cover that, so they use the RGP to go to the grocery store or whatnot.
So now, what program, if someone's wanting to be transported from Cabarrus to Stanley County, would that fall into Medicaid transportation, or what sort of transportation would they be receiving? If you-
Currently, that would be the only way to go out of county would be Medicaid.
Okay.
And how do you make that happen? Do you go into the other counties, or do you meet them at the county line and their vans pick you up?
We have a verbal agreement with Stanley, and we do a lot with Rowan, where we'll do meets at the line.
Okay, because I got behind one of the county vans the other day and went to Locust, dropped someone off. That car picked them up, and I don't know where they were going, but the van.
Lynx
met 'em-
van or regular?
No, regular. Met them in Locust, got in another car and left. So I just wonder what kind of transportation that would be.
I would have to investigate that. I don't know what that would be.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, 4.6, we are at the budget, and we've had, obviously, a number of meetings this past month, concerning the budget. And so we will have to have a public hearing, and we have a couple different funds that we need to adopt, along with the budget, the fire tax, any capital improvement plan, et cetera. Are there any questions, comments, anything that anybody has as far as the budget goes from our conversations? Questions that have been unanswered?
How much less is this budget than last year's?
Erica, do you know? Do you have that?
Let's see.
Last year's was 214 million, wasn't it?
That's correct, and this year
This
is
year
right
is
at
211
200 million. That's correct.
211 million. So it's $3 million.
Sorry.
If we add the capital improvements onto that, what's that gonna do? It'll be more than last year's, right?
The capital improvements will not impact the operating budget.
I know that, but if we put it in there, it will be more than last year's.
I'm not sure, what are you referring to as capital improvements? Those
schools.
additional projects that we were looking at for the schools and some of that? Yeah, that would come out of, it would not be part of the operating budget, it would be.
Yeah, I know that, but it would still be money spent this coming year.
Yes, sir. It's not recurring money, that's just one-time money that you've got in your fund balance right now.
I mean, all money is one-time money. You spend it one time, and all you spend it.
Well, you spend it, yeah, but it's not going to recur again next year.
But, in other words, what recurs next year is new funds, though.
Yeah, the one-time money we're talking about, that's in your savings account, and that's purely optional. You don't have to spend that, you can leave that in your savings account.
You talking about the $14.5 million in the budget summary. You got $14,439,000 unassigned. You got $30 million unassigned, 15% board fund balance. So county's sitting on $45 million worth of cash right now, right?
I don't know the exact number, but Pam or Erica,
Would you run those numbers again? 14 point, that was unassigned, that was the excess fund balance past all of your 15% that you keep in there,
Right.
cover your operational expenses. That money is what's available for appropriation for anything that you would want to use it for. You use $9.5 million of it to pay down the jail annex in March of this year. We anticipate, based on how the year is going to end up, that you would have available to you at a comfortable level somewhere between $4 and $5 million for one-time projects, if you so choose to do that, and that was what was brought up during the budget process.
So there's not $14 million in here. You took $9 million out of it.
Yes, the board did that at their retreat in January.
but check that.
So it come out of this
That's
$14
not-
million.
Check that.
I think you're looking at for FY13 projection of fund balance. It already incorporates the $9 million that the board has taken out. So there is $14 million that is projected to be as unassigned available.
2013.
That's correct.
There's one other thing on here I looked at. On the arena, if I can find it. Other financing sources, $959,000. What is that?
For the arena,
Yeah.
Part of it's the contribution from the general fund to operate the arena.
Is that payment made on the arena too?
Not the debt service, no,
Debt
sir.
service not included.
Just operations.
And sales and service at the arena is only $616,000, and we taking $1 million out of the general fund.
The sales and services are what funds the fair, and the fair is self-balancing. It does not require any tax dollars. So what's located in the arena fund is the Cabarrus County Fair and the operations by SMG of the actual facility for the arena.
What is the payment on the debt service out there?
I'd have to pull out the detailed debt service section, but I can get that for you.
That is included in this budget, isn't it?
It's included in the debt service of the general fund budget.
That's not in the, the school system is, there's $32 million we paying on the, out, and of that $32 million, $13 million of it is interest, right?
I would have to pull the detailed budget and look at that.
Well, I mean, that's what's on this paper here.
Okay. On the ordinance? Yes.
Yeah, budget ordinance.
You got that number?
For,
Have you noticed the last week or so about the economist talking about the economy and where it's going? Nobody's seen
probably
anything
depends on
about.
which one you
Which
talk
economist
to.
are you, which economist are
I'm
you
talking
talking?
about anybody except those that work for the White House is lying to us. I'm talking about a true economist that knows what's going on, and they know where this country's headed, and they know where it's going. And you can't keep going in debt, and I just don't believe that you can ever spend yourself out of debt. And it just seemed to me like they hadn't been, what do we cut on this budget?
$3 million. $3 million.
Yeah, I know, but I'm trying to figure out the percentage of that. That's about,
It's about
2%
1.5%.
that we cut.
Yes, sir.
And I mean,
Do you want to identify some cuts other than what the county
no, I don't want
manager-
to add nothing to it, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
The capital improvements for the school, I don't want to add nothing to that. I don't want to add nothing to any of it. I'd like to see us keep the budget, well,
How about this? May I interject just a second? What debt do we have that we can pay off that is not a pre-penalty payment? Do you know of anything right now?
I'm not aware of any at this point in time, but I can verify if
Okay.
something's coming due.
I don't know, but I'm assuming where some of the things that are concerning Commissioner Burge, or some of the things I thought about over the weekend, is if we can identify debt that does not have a prepayment penalty, can you please let us know? Because if it's not going to penalize us to pay it off, let's figure out about paying that off, because that certainly is reoccurring, and that would go to reducing next year's budget, so we don't have that penalty, that payment to do.
Certainly, we can do that.
So, but I don't know if we are in a position with any of the debt that we have that will not have a prepayment penalty clause. So if we can identify it, I think that would be number one that we look at to do something. Because that will affect our reoccurring, that will affect our general fund on a reoccurring basis, because we're not going to have that debt to pay anymore.
Yes, and that's why we went after the
I didn't mean to
annex.
interject, Commissioner Burge, but I
No,
thought
I
that's what you
understand.
were getting at.
That's what we did with the annex in January. So I will look and
Exactly.
see if there's another section of any of the COPS or GOs that we could possibly pay.
Pay off or pay down.
Pay down or pay off,
Yeah.
and depending on what sections of how the certificates were sold. But we will definitely check that out and let you know how much that potentially could be.
I think that's one way that we can cut future budgets.
Absolutely.
I think another thing that we can do in cutting future budgets is looking at capital projects that we know are coming up to identify those that we can pay in full, as opposed to going in debt if that's something that the board is going to do 5 years from now, or 4 years from now. we do it now since we got the cash. Do you understand what is that if a project is a necessary project, instead of, like some of the things that you and I have been concerned about is preventive maintenance and maintenance.
Right.
And if we can address those issues that makes the building last longer, then it saves from having to borrow when we won't have to borrow it if we instead of putting a Band-Aid on it, we fix it. So if we can identify projects either in the schools or in the county that by fixing it up or working on it and making it being done correctly, we don't have to incur any debt, foreseeable debt. That would be another way we can affect future budgets as well.
And apparently, there's quite a few of the maintenance things out there need to be fixed now.
I would not say that was with the county. I think that's.
No, I went to school board,
And
but it's
those
still
are-
costing the county.
Well, I understand, but that's some of the things that I was trying to identify the other day when we were meeting is things that we can fix, and that although it won't be a brand-new school, it would certainly be, the school will continue to perform. So that's what I was trying to identify.
The other thing I noticed on here, are permit fees going up?
No, permit fees are not going up, but we have seen increased activity, so we've gotten increased revenues from that, and we foresee those continuing into next year and have projected it.
Okay. My other question is, on revenue neutral, what percentage of taxpayers will be revenue neutral? No, they won't pay any more. If you go to 70 cent, they'll not pay any more taxes this year than what they paid last year.
We've not gotten the latest since it's fluctuated so much here at the end, but we can get that for you.
Now, also, I'd like to know what percentage is going to go down and what percentage is going to go up.
Oh, may I ask for a point of clarification? When you're talking about taxpayers, are you including,
I'm talking about property owners.
well, are you including residential, are you including just residential?
No, I'm talking about anybody that pays property taxes in Cabarrus County, and we keep saying it's going to be revenue neutral. Well, there's no way I can be revenue neutral.
Well,
My property went down 3%. That would be 2 cents on the tax rate, for me to be revenue neutral.
my firm is considered a body. Are you talking about corporations and companies also that would be revenue neutral?
That do
Any
pay-
property?
That do pay
Okay.
property taxes, yes.
Okay. That, I just want to understand what information we're getting back.
Brent had a chart in his information that he presented at the retreat that talked about where the classes fell, and we can probably get that.
Yeah,
What he
we
did
can
was
get
at our
those updated
retreat, he said
numbers
that
too.
if your property went down 13.9%, or I think it was 13.9% or greater,
You would be revenue neutral.
you'd be revenue neutral at a 72-cent tax,
At
72 point, tax rate.
Right.
So when it goes down to 70%,
You're
I
gonna
mean,
be-
70 cents, does that 13.9% decrease to, if your property value decreased to 12.5% or 12%?
Yeah, because when he brought the final revaluation in, it wasn't the 13.9,
I think.
it was to start with. It turned out to be 12 point something, so there was an adjustment to it.
Okay, so at 70 cents, it may be down to 11.5%. I don't know.
And also, the names that were advertised in the newspaper for people that hadn't paid their taxes, what percentage of those have been collected?
I believe when we had the retreat, we were told that our collection rate for last year was 96 point da-da-da-da.
Yeah, but I'd like to know
which
what
was-
it is for this year. People in worse shape this year
That
than
is
were last
this
year.
year. That is this year.
Well, I mean, for the ones that, the names that were put in the paper, what, just a few weeks ago?
We don't, I've been on the board, you don't get that information till closer to the end of this calendar year. But I'm
But they don't, I
certain,
mean, they
Yeah, and
don't.
it wouldn't be just based on that specific list. It would be overall tax collection for the year.
We can give
That
you a
number.
comparison of what May of last year looks like to May of this year, if that's what you're kind of looking for, to give you a comparison to see how we stand at the same point in time.
That would give you some of the amounts been collected.
We can provide that for you.
But, I mean, the thing is you got a lot of people out there can't pay their taxes. Somebody hadn't worked in the last 18 months, how are they gonna pay their taxes? They can't hardly live. You know, we got people over in the jailhouse getting 3 good meals a day free. A lot of people out there working, getting 1 a day. And they just, something seems to be not quite right about that to me.
And again, I mean, if you can identify areas to cut in the budget, but you have to come up with suggestions. The county manager presented his budget, and, you know, if there's an area that you think needs to be cut in order to get something less than a 70-cent rate, then, you know, now's the time to identify any specific cuts that you think need to be made. And then the whole, you know, all the commissioners can talk about specific cuts. So, I mean, I don't think anybody will disagree with you on, you know, trying to make cuts in the budget. And, you know, they came up with cuts, got the rate down to 70 cents instead of revenue neutral, which is 72 cents. So, you know, I just think anybody that wants to that can take the budget and, you know, look at it and come up with suggestions, then we can all talk about very specific cuts that could be made. But I mean, I need to have specifics as to
No, I mean, personally,
what you're looking at.
I think Mr. Marlowe, I don't know what can be done at our last meeting, public meeting, he was the one who came up and said that we ought to just forget about the reval and go back to where we were and leave the tax rate like it was, which I don't have a problem with doing that.
Well, then you're going to
Unless
adversely.
you were somebody whose property has greatly reduced, and then I would argue that too. If my property, which it didn't, but if mine had gone down 15 or 20%, and you left it the same, then that's not fair. You're making me pay more than what my value's worth. So
No, you're not, if you're revenue neutral.
I'm not revenue neutral at that. I mean, if I was in an area and that property went down in value 20%, then what I'm going to pay with this new value at 70 cents, I'm going to pay less. So I don't want you to mess with it. I want you to keep going like it is. My home, we're going to pay $30 or $40 more. I'm okay with that. At 70 cents, we're going to pay $30 or $40 more.
Well, I'm gonna pay more than that.
So, but I mean, that's what I mean. Every property's different, and you can't look and say, well, these guys we want to treat this way, and these we want to treat this way. We have to make a determination of which way to go. So that's what the recommendation is with the revalued numbers to go at 70 cents. That's what the manager's budget says. I mean, I don't really think it's an option to say, ignore the reval. I don't think it's an option. And that doesn't mean that 3 commissioners don't think it's an option. So, Commissioner Meesmer, you were not able to attend with us Thursday when we had the presentations from all the volunteer fire departments. And have you gotten information? Do we need to get you some information on that?
I looked over some that was in our information, but I plan to talk to Mike before our next meeting.
Okay, or Erica can go over those too.
Okay.
There were a couple numbers that were not, during the process have shifted just a little bit.
Right.
Harrisburg and
Midland.
Midland were 2 that were slightly different than what was in our packet.
Okay.
But I do want to make sure you get that information so that, because of course they'll be asking us to adopt the fire tax rates. So that was an area I wanted to make sure that you had covered. Any other information that anybody needs as far as the budget goes between now and in 2 weeks? We'll have call for a public hearing and, of course, the adoption of the budget at that time. The other option would be that if we don't, we have to adopt the budget by June 30th, which I think is a Saturday maybe, Sunday?
Yep, Saturday.
Saturday. So, if we don't adopt the budget in 2 weeks at the regular meeting, then we could have a called meeting if need be, but we do need to adopt the budget no later than June 30th. So just primarily want to make sure that any questions that you have, we can address.
I have a question that, at the beginning, we were discussing, or Mr. Burge was asking about the $14 million that's unassigned. That's projected for 2013. That's not.
It's not
what we
actual, it's
currently-
projected.
Right.
That's correct. It can change.
Okay.
It
and
will
then
change.
This year's unassigned fund balance was the $9 million that went to pay off the jail. Is that correct? And then the leftover is
That's part of
these
it.
one-time monies that we were gonna, decide about capital projects. Is that correct? And you guys discussed that on Thursday. Is that?
We
Yeah.
did talk about the list. The Rowan Cabarrus
Right.
had asked for an additional $380,000 to do $480 for their renovation.
Right.
We had a list from Kannapolis City Schools, Cabarrus County Schools, and we also, so we had talked about that Tuesday of last week, I think, when you were here,
Okay.
to look over the list
Right.
and see what, any suggestions that you have that jumped out. Commissioner White mentioned, for example, the windows at Royal Oaks Elementary School and some of those maintenance issues that, trying to address those. We also mentioned the possibility of adding a room on at the senior center. If you face the building, the right-hand side, coming out with that side and adding another space that they could have for more activities, because they had mentioned that they were running out of space in that building. So that was another option. We don't have numbers for that yet, but to try to get numbers for that. So
Okay.
we did have those discussions,
So it's
yes.
about $4.5 million worth of capital. Is that?
I think we were looking at anywhere, we identified more projects than we probably would
available.
want to do.
Okay.
But somewhere in the $3 to $4 million range is where the county manager said would be a comfort zone if there were projects that we wanted to do,
Okay.
if we identified projects.
Okay.
Erica, you want to go over
Changes.
your changes since the discussions, since the
Well,
original?
before we go over those changes, I got some questions.
Yes.
If we're projecting a $14 million surplus, why don't we just adopt a tax rate that is reflective of that $14 million, which will come in and we'll be okay? Why don't we do that?
Well, you wouldn't want to deplete all of your savings.
Well, you're not, because you're projecting a $14 million surplus. So if we're projecting a $14 million surplus and we adopt a tax rate that is $14 million less or $10 million less, then we're still a $4 million surplus. Why don't we do that?
You're using your savings account to pay off, to balance your checkbook. So
Well-
you're putting one-time money into a recurring budget and that will no longer be there next year.
Okay, let me back up. From what the discussion was earlier, that Commissioner Burge has was a projected surplus over this next year of $14 million.
No. What we're projecting is what's the balance of your fund balance at the end of this year, plus any savings that we realize from our operating budget this year.
Okay?
Will create that projected $14 million.
Okay. So you're not projecting a surplus in 2013 of $14 million.
No, sir. What we're projecting is a balanced budget, so.
That's what I was wondering.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, next question is in regards to the schools have asked for additional monies of anywhere from $2.1 million for one school system and I believe $1.4 million for another school system. Is that in the current budget?
The additional 2.1 million?
Correct.
No, it is not.
How about the additional 1.4 by the other school system?
No, it is not.
Okay. Has the schools provided us with a breakout of their request according to general statutes that we need it, the way we need it?
We have requested that information. We have received the information from Cabarrus County Schools as of 3 o'clock this afternoon. And
In that breakout form?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
And Kannapolis City Schools are still working on theirs. They said that they will have it by tomorrow morning.
So, do we have to advertise the budget as they presented it to us by 3 o'clock this afternoon and 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, or 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, so that when we adopt any budget that we adopt, it'll encompass it in that format?
We will have to, the board chooses to adopt it in that format, we will have to include it in the budget ordinance. So it will be included in the budget ordinance.
Can we address that right now? I would like for any budget from the school systems to be presented and for us to adopt it in accordance to the general statutes as we did last year. I'm asking that right now. If we can do a consensus, then I'm not saying we have to vote on that, but I certainly think that's important that we do.
The format we're proposing, that we're discussing, is not the format that was adopted in last year.
Well, the format that I'm proposing is according to the general statutes, or however we're supposed to, the way we've discussed it.
Okay, because we have some flexibility in how we adopt it. What we're looking at from the information that was provided was to put more constraints on how the money is broken apart.
That's what I was anticipating, that's the format that I thought we asked for it in.
Yes, and that's what we asked for this year, but we did not do it that
Okay.
way last year. I'm just wanted to point that out.
Okay, well, that's what I would like, is that when we vote on a budget, whenever we do, that it's in the format as we got it today at 3 o'clock, and that's what I would like for us to adopt, not a broad general budget. Are we,
I'm fine with that.
are you fine with that, Commissioner Burge? Okay.
Okay, no, 1 second. When can we get those two budgets? Obviously, prior to our meeting next week, or 2 weeks, but
We can send
do
you.
you have a,
Well, we can send you the one for Kannapolis City, for Cabarrus County Schools in the morning, so you'll have it then.
I just soon wait and get both of them at the same time, to be
Okay.
honest with you, so.
We can send you a cumulative ordinance once
Wednesday or Thursday
Kannapolis
or
gets here.
Friday?
Exactly. Yes.
Sometime this week.
Sometime
I
this
mean,
week.
It's not a little thing to have to sit down and look at. It's not like it's 1 or 2 pages.
Well, if we get it
presume.
from Kannapolis City Schools tomorrow, we should have it to you as early as tomorrow.
Okay, whenever you can get it, look at it. Is that okay with you?
And
I
finally,
mean, I'd like to look at it, so.
on the list that you're about to talk about, one thing that if, after paying off debt and things like that, if we can get some hard, realistic numbers in regards to the planetarium out at Central Cabarrus, I think that's, if that is a project that is something that can be done, it would enhance our community tremendously, not only for the high school, but also for the other schools as well as the general public. So I know that Mayor Kitts has been very active in that. So you know, that would be a source, or she would be a source of information.
I think the school system was trying to come up with ways to raise funds in the community, so hopefully they have some
I think,
information on
I would
getting
assume
it
they do,
operational.
but I know that Mayor Kitts was very active it has been very active in that project. And Commissioner Meismer, was a planetarium open when you attended?
Yeah, whenever I was a student at Central Cabarrus.
So many years ago?
Yeah, 2005. The planetarium was operational, and I certainly enjoyed it. I took several astronomy classes, and yeah, I think that would be something that I would be willing to look at. Certainly if it's a community and, county partnership, I think that'd be great.
And as Erica goes over the budget changes, we will also be adopting the Health Alliance in 2 separate line items, one for school health nurse funding and one for the remainder of their other activities within their fund.
All right. Are we ready to move to the budget changes? Before you, you have budget changes that have occurred since the last meeting that we wanted to update you on. The first, and each of the changes have been highlighted with an asterisk to the side. The very first one impacts various departments. We received notification of our rental increase for the Human Services Center. That impact is $33,000 for the fiscal year. The second modification or change to the budget is a slight reduction in the unemployment benefit that's payable to, in the cooperative extension budget. That will reduce our expenditure by $800. The next item is other contributions. We discussed in the last meeting, the Criminal Justice Partnership had dissolved, and that will be an impact or reduction of $131,000 in both revenues and expenditures to our budget. There's no county dollars there. Also discussed in the last meeting the forester, reducing the amount appropriated to the forester by the amount of the truck, which is $14,400. That will be reduced. General services, we will have an increase in the general services utilities line item as a result of increasing the library hours. That increase is projected to be $8,000. That was one item that we overlooked, so we wanted to make sure we included that increase in as well. As Pam mentioned, the Cabarrus Health Alliance, this was an item that was discussed at the last meeting, or not the last meeting, but the previous board meeting prior to the meeting on the fire districts, in appropriating more funds towards the school nurse programs. So we researched all the information that you asked us to get and the impact associated with it. To increase the number of days for funding the school's nurses from 100 to 185 days, that will be a minimal impact of $9,103 for Kannapolis City Schools. I don't think we budgeted anything, or Kannapolis City Schools,
Cabarrus County got a waiver again, but next year's budget, we'll have to add, 14, would have to add 5 more days. The legislature has added 5 more days to the school calendar, or student days to the school calendar, which means nurses would need to be funded for an additional week. But this, for 13, it's just Kannapolis City. For 14, we'll have to add Cabarrus County in at that time.
Okay. So for Kannapolis City Schools, that'll be about $9,400 increase. Also, there were market adjustments that were discussed as well. The impact of the market adjustments that have occurred for the school nurse program is $85,000. Those are market adjustments, it's $75,000. There were other salary adjustments that had occurred prior to that the Health Alliance was having to fund via their fund balance, and that's an additional $85,000. So those items total $167,287. That will be an increase to fund the school nurse program for Kannapolis City Schools and an additional 5 days to fund the market and hourly adjustments that have had to occur. And also, I think those are the 2 items that we discussed, for a total impact of $167,287 increase. As Pam mentioned, we would have 2 separate line items. We would break out the school nurse program. The funding for it will be a separate line item where we will bill for that rather than issue a 1/12 allocation that we do for the rest of the Health Alliance. We would just bill for the actual services, the amount expended in the year.
So our rent at the Human Service Center is going up?
Yes, it is.
That much for you?
In the original calculation, it was anticipated that it would increase in December, and it increased in July.
Wow.
And just as an aside, because it's not in there, the portion of the school nurses that's currently paid to Cabarrus, which then they in turn send to the Health Alliance, or paid to Kannapolis City Schools, that they in turn send to the Health Alliance, will be deducted from their budgets. So we will have a true number for the school nurse program. And it will be, it's budgeted, but it will be paid as actual. So you want to budget enough to cover the actual, but if, for some reason, somebody at one salary leaves and another nurse is hired at the starting salary level and there's a difference, we would not pay the higher amount, we would pay what's actually spent. Okay, they would also, the Health Alliance will cover an additional position, which is a kind of a substitute nurse, and they're currently doing that, and they would continue to cover that position. And they would also continue to cover some supplies that they provide. So, but this would get us at kind of a base year so that we know exactly what we're spending on school nurses as we go forward, and we can truly track that number instead of looking in 3 different pots and, shuffling the money around, so.
Is rather than the funds passing through the school districts, what you'll find is a transfer from Cabarrus County Schools of about $793,000, and for Kannapolis City Schools, $136,000. So when we draw up the budget ordinance, their amounts will be reduced by that much, and their health alliance will be increased by that same amount.
So if a comment's made that we cut funding from the schools by 700-some thousand, that is not truly a reflection, because the money is just moving from one area to the next, so we can better track it. So I'm not saying that anybody's going to say we cut the budget, but if you just compare the actual numbers for those 3, current year and from 12 and 13, there will be a difference, which we just have to remember that for this year it has to do with just moving the funding. The county's portion is not changing with those line items. I just want to point that out, because I know somewhere we're going to get a comment from somebody saying that we had reduced funding, and we're not really reducing funding. It's just
And it will be
moving around.
documented in the school section of the budget of what we
I'm sure it
did.
will be. And I think from the feedback that I got, at least from the Health Alliance, is that they felt like that was a good move to make sure it's much more transparent as far as what that program is costing and everything else. So, any questions, comments? That does bring the total proposed budget. Also, I don't know, we mentioned before, of course, the sheriff, those positions, you see the revenue and the expense are equal, so it's not costing additional dollars. Same thing with the jail and the grant from the Miriam and Robin Hayes grants covering that other position. So even though the budget does increase overall, those funds are coming from somewhere else. So, any other questions concerning the budget at this time? I'm sure that we will have more discussion in 2 weeks at the regular meeting when all 5 of us will be in attendance. So, okay. And let's see, now if you'll look at the regular meeting agenda that we have. We do have a number of, couple public hearings that we'll need to have under new business. If you will, we need to add item number 3, Cabarrus County Schools QSCB as a placeholder. Other than that, if you'll look at the consent agenda, that's on there. Is there anything, if that's okay, if there's anything that needs to change? Otherwise, are there any comments about the agenda with that one addition? If not, I would accept a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda as amended. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Before you say a second, don't you want to add anything from today to the agenda?
Are they not on there?
Well, don't we have solid waste?
It's on there. It's on consent.
Yeah. Okay.
Transportation falls under new business.
I'll make a second.
Okay. No, it's a good thing to double check, because sometimes I do miss them.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the regular meeting agenda as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And that brings us to a closed session. Commissioners, we do need a motion to go into closed session to discuss matters related to threatened or pending litigation and also economic development as authorized by the general statutes.
So moved.
Have the second one. Have a motion and a second to go into closed session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. In that case, we are adjourned, and we're going to go down the hallway for closed session.